When we start to examine why narcissists avoid kissing empaths, we need to understand something fundamental about what authentic kissing actually requires, and why that requirement is impossible for someone living in the narcissist's particular psychological state. Real kissing, the kind that actually means something, that creates genuine intimacy, isn't just a physical act. It requires presence, full, embodied, undefended presence. You have to be in your body, in the moment, with another person. You have to allow yourself to feel what you're feeling, to be aware of sensations, to be vulnerable to the experience as it's happening. This might sound obvious, but for most people, presence is the natural state during moments of genuine intimacy. When you kiss someone you care about, you're there. You're not thinking about your grocery list or planning tomorrow's meeting. You're in the kiss, feeling the connection, experiencing the moment. But the narcissist doesn't operate this way. The narcissist exists in a state of chronic dissociation, a fundamental disconnection from their own body, their own feelings, their own authentic experience. This dissociation isn't a choice or a mood. It's a defensive structure that formed early in their development as protection against overwhelming pain, shame, or trauma that the psyche couldn't process. The narcissist learned to disconnect from their body because their body held feelings that were too dangerous to feel. They learned to disconnect from the present moment. Because being fully present meant being vulnerable to pain they couldn't survive. They learned to disconnect from authentic experience because authenticity was punished, dismissed, or treated as irrelevant. So they developed this capacity to be physically present while psychologically absent, to go through the motions of life while not actually inhabiting their experience, to perform emotions, behaviors, even physical intimacy, while remaining fundamentally disconnected from what they're doing. This dissociated state becomes their baseline. It's how they move through the world. And for many interactions, it works well enough. They can perform conversation while dissociated. They can perform charm, anger, even other forms of physical contact, while maintaining that internal distance from the experience. But kissing, genuine kissing, is different. Because kissing, when done authentically, is an act of sustained, focused, embodied presence. You can't really kiss someone while dissociated and have it feel like anything more than mechanics. The quality of presence shows up in a kiss in ways it doesn't show up in other interactions. And here's where the empath becomes particularly problematic. For the narcissist, the empath brings full presence to kissing. When an empath kisses, they're actually there. They're in their body, in their feelings, in the moment, in the connection. They bring their whole self to the act. There's an aliveness, an authenticity, an energetic fullness to how they engage. And when the narcissist encounters this, when they're faced with someone who's fully present while they themselves are fundamentally absent, the contrast becomes impossible to hide. The empath's presence throws the narcissist's absence into stark relief. Think about what this feels like for the narcissist. They're going through the physical motions of kissing while internally disconnected, while the person they're kissing is fully alive in the experience. It's like standing next to someone in bright sunlight while you, yourself, are in shadow. The difference becomes palpable, undeniable. The difference becomes palpable, undeniable. And this creates a moment of unwanted awareness. For just a second, the narcissist might actually feel their own emptiness. They might brush up against the reality of how disconnected they are from their own experience. They might sense the vast difference between the empath's alive presence and their own defended absence. This is profoundly uncomfortable because the narcissist's entire defensive structure exists to prevent exactly this kind of awareness. They're not supposed to notice their disconnection. They're not supposed to feel their disconnection. The dissociation is supposed to protect them from confronting these realities, but the empath's presence during kissing makes it impossible not to notice, at least for a moment. And that moment of contact with their own inner void, however brief, however quickly defended against, is something the narcissist's psyche will do anything to avoid. So they avoid the kiss. They might make excuses. They're not into kissing. They don't see the point. It's not their thing. They might kiss briefly and perfunctorily, keeping it quick enough that the contrast doesn't have time to register. They might kiss only when performing for others, when the external validation makes the internal discomfort worth it. But they avoid sustained, authentic, present kissing with the empath, because it forces them into one-on contact with their own absence. The empath often experiences this avoidance as rejection, as lack of desire, as evidence they're not attractive enough or desirable enough. But it has nothing to do with the empath's desirability. It has everything to do with the fact that the empath's presence is too real, too alive, too embodied, and that aliveness highlights everything the narcissist has deadened in themselves to survive. The narcissist can engage in other physical acts while maintaining their dissociation because those acts can remain transactional, mechanical, goal-oriented, but kissing, real kissing, resists this kind of disconnection. It demands presence, and presence is precisely what the narcissist cannot afford. So they pull away, they create distance, they avoid the very act that could create genuine intimacy, because genuine intimacy would require them to be genuinely present. And being present would mean feeling what they've spent a lifetime dissociating from: the wound, the shame, the emptiness, the terror of their own inner landscape. And the terror of their own inner landscape. The empath's kiss isn't rejected because it offers too little. It's avoided because it demands too much. The one thing the narcissist cannot give without their entire defensive structure collapsing. When your survival depends on absence, another's presence doesn't invite connection. It threatens annihilation. But beyond the issue of presence and dissociation, there's another layer to why the narcissist avoids kissing the empath. And this one goes to the very architecture of their psychological defenses. Because kissing, when it's authentic, creates a particular kind of vulnerability that the narcissist's entire personality structure is designed to prevent. Let me explain what makes kissing uniquely vulnerable compared to other forms of physical contact or intimacy. When you kiss someone face to face, deeply, authentically, there's nowhere to hide. Your face is completely exposed. Your eyes, if they're open, are inches from another person's eyes. Your breath mingles with theirs. There's no protective distance, no barrier, no way to maintain the kind of psychological separation that other forms of contact allow. Think about the difference between kissing, and other intimate acts. Many forms of physical intimacy can be performed while maintaining a kind of internal distance. You can be physically engaged while emotionally disconnected. You can go through motions while your psyche remains defended, protected, separate. There are positions, angles, dynamics that allow you to remain hidden, even while appearing engaged, but sustained, passionate kissing doesn't allow for this. It's inherently face-to-face. It requires a kind of openness, a meeting, an encounter between two people that resists the kind of dissociative distance the narcissist relies on. It's almost impossible to truly kiss someone while maintaining your full defensive armor. And this is precisely the problem for the narcissist. Their entire psychological structure is organized around one primary goal: preventing vulnerability. Because vulnerability for the narcissist isn't just uncomfortable, it's experienced as potentially annihilating. Their defenses aren't excessive caution, they're survival mechanisms, protecting against what feels like existential threat. The narcissist learned early, often in childhood, that being vulnerable led to pain, shame, or abandonment, that showing your real self, your real needs, your real feelings resulted in rejection, ridicule, or worse. So they built elaborate defenses: the grandiose false self, the emotional walls, the strategic manipulation, all designed to ensure they never have to be truly vulnerable again. These defenses work reasonably well in most situations. The narcissist can interact with people while maintaining their protective barriers. They can even engage in certain forms of physical intimacy while keeping their defenses intact, while staying safely behind their walls, even as their body goes through intimate motions. But genuine kissing, the kind an empath brings to the act, creates pressure on those defenses. in a way that's difficult to resist. Because the empath doesn't just physically kiss. They bring authentic openness to the moment. They're vulnerable. Their guard is down. They're meeting you. They're meeting you with their real self, undefended, genuinely present. And when someone meets you with genuine vulnerability, it creates an almost gravitational pull toward reciprocal vulnerability. There's a kind of invitation, an opening, a possibility for real meeting that's hard to resist when you're that close, that exposed, in that kind of intimate proximity. For someone with healthy defenses, this invitation is welcome. It's the whole point of kissing. This mutual vulnerability, this willingness to be open and exposed with another person, this temporary dissolving of boundaries that allows for genuine connection. But for the narcissist, this invitation is terrifying, because reciprocal vulnerability would mean dropping their defenses. It would mean allowing their real self, the wounded, shame-bound, fragmented self they've spent their life hiding, to be exposed. It would mean risking the very thing their entire personality structure exists to prevent, being truly seen in their vulnerability and finding that unbearable. The empath's open, vulnerable presence during kissing creates what we might call pressure toward authenticity. Their genuine openness makes your defended falseness harder to maintain. Their willingness to be seen makes your hiding more effortful. Their vulnerability invites yours in a way that requires active resistance to refuse. And the narcissist must refuse. They can't accept this invitation to mutual vulnerability because their psyche has organized itself around the belief that vulnerability equals destruction. That being truly seen means being rejected. That dropping their defenses means psychological annihilation. So they avoid the situation that creates this pressure. They avoid sustained, intimate kissing with the empath because it pushes them toward a kind of openness they absolutely cannot allow. It's not that they don't want connection. Part of the minute people does. It's that the cost of that connection, in terms of required vulnerability, is more than their defensive structure can afford. The narcissist might engage in brief, performative kisses, quick pecks that don't require sustained openness, that can be executed while defenses remain intact. They might kiss when intoxicated, when their defenses are chemically lowered, and they can later blame the alcohol for any vulnerability that slipped through. They might kiss during the love bombing phase when they're performing intimacy and can maintain enough dissociation to keep their real self protected. But sustained, sober, authentic kissing with an empath who brings genuine vulnerability to the act, that's different. That creates conditions where their defenses are under real pressure, where the invitation to reciprocal openness is too strong to ignore without actively, obviously refusing it. And actively refusing vulnerability exposes something the narcissist would rather keep hidden, that they're deeply defended, that they're not actually capable of the intimacy, they claim to want, that beneath the performance of connection is a person terrified of genuine contact. So they avoid the kiss, not because they don't desire the empath, but because the empath's vulnerable presence during kissing threatens to reveal what the narcissist most needs to hide, that they're fundamentally unable to meet vulnerability with vulnerability, that they're defended against the very intimacy they claim to seek. The empath experiences this as rejection or lack of passion. But what it actually is fear. Not fear of the empath, but fear of what meeting the empath's openness would require. Dropping the armor that's kept them psychologically alive. Dropping the vulnerability their entire life has taught them to avoid. Allowing a kind of contact that might reveal the defended emptiness underneath the grandiose performance. When openness meets you at the threshold of intimacy, you either walk through together or retreat alone, and the narcissist will always choose the familiar prison of their defenses over the terrifying freedom of genuine contact. But there's another dimension to this avoidance that goes beyond psychology into something that might sound esoteric, but is actually quite tangible if you've experienced it. The energetic quality of the empath's presence during kissing. The energetic quality of the empath's presence during kissing and why that particular frequency is intolerable for the narcissist's defended system. Now, when I say energy or energetic, I'm not necessarily talking about something mystical or supernatural. I'm talking about the felt sense of another person's presence, the quality of attention they bring, the emotional resonance they carry, the way their psychological state creates an almost palpable atmosphere that you can sense when you're in close proximity to them. We've all experienced this, even if we don't have language for it. You can feel when someone is genuinely present versus when they're distracted. You can sense when someone's attention is open and receptive versus when they're closed off and defended. You can detect the difference between someone who's emotionally available and someone who's walled off, even before a word is spoken. This isn't mysterious. It's pattern recognition, subtle cues, the 1,000 microsignals our nervous systems are constantly reading from the people around us. We're extraordinarily attuned to each other's internal states, even when we're not consciously aware we're picking up this information. And empaths carry a particular energetic signature that becomes especially pronounced during intimate contact. They bring an openness, a permeability, a lack of defended barriers that creates a very specific quality of presence. When an empath kisses you, they're not just physically close, they're energetically open, their boundaries are relaxed, their attention is fully directed toward you and the moment, their emotional presence is unguarded, penetrating, alive. For someone who's equally open, this is experienced as intimacy, as connection, as the whole point of kissing. But for the narcissist, whose entire existence depends on maintaining rigid psychological barriers, this energetic openness is experienced as invasive, threatening too much, because here's what the empath's energy does during a kiss: it penetrates. It penetrates, not in any aggressive sense, but simply because openness naturally moves toward and through barriers. The empath's undefended presence during kissing creates a kind of energetic contact that doesn't respect the narcissist's carefully constructed walls. Think about what this means for someone whose survival depends on those walls. A narcissist has spent years, perhaps decades, building psychological barriers between their false self and their true self, between their conscious awareness and their core wound, between what they show the world and what they're desperately hiding. These barriers are the architecture of their defense system. And then here comes the empath with their open, penetrating presence. And suddenly those barriers are under pressure. The empath's energy during kissing reaches toward the parts of the narcissist that are supposed to remain protected, hidden, inaccessible. Not because the empath is trying to invade, they're simply being fully present. But genuine presence naturally seeks contact with what's real, and what's real in the narcissist is buried beneath layers of defense. The narcissist experiences this as the empath seeing too much, feeling too much, getting too close to what cannot be accessed. During a sustained, intimate kiss with an empath, the narcissist can sense that their barriers are being penetrated, that the empath's presence is reaching toward their protected core, that they're at risk of being truly known in ways their psyche has organized itself to prevent. This is different from the empath's perception or intellectual understanding. We talked earlier about the empath seeing through the narcissist's mask, but this is more immediate, more visceral. This is the felt sense during intimate physical contact that the other person's energy is touching parts of you that are supposed to remain untouchable. And the narcissist system responds with avoidance, not necessarily conscious avoidance. They might not think this person's energy is too penetrating. But at a somatic level, at the level of their nervous system, there's a pulling away from contact that feels too deep, too revealing, too threatening to their defensive structure. The empath often experiences this pulling away as confusing. They can sense the narcissist's discomfort with kissing, but they can't understand why. The physical attraction seems to be there. The narcissist claims to want intimacy, but there's this palpable resistance to sustained, intimate kissing that doesn't make logical sense. What the empath doesn't realize is that their presence itself, their open, undefended, emotionally alive presence, is what's creating the discomfort, not because there's anything wrong with their presence, but because that quality of presence is fundamentally incompatible with the narcissist's need to remain defended. The narcissist can tolerate the empath's energetic presence in other contexts where there's more physical distance, more opportunity to deflect or distract, more ways to maintain their barriers even while appearing engaged. But the close proximity of kissing, the sustained contact, the intimacy of the act, it all creates conditions where the empath, it all creates conditions where the empath's open energy has too much access, reaches too deeply, threatens too much penetration of the walls that must remain intact. This is also why the narcissist might be more comfortable with other forms of physical intimacy that don't require the same face-to-face, sustained, energetically open contact that kissing demands. They can engage physically while maintaining more internal distance, more energetic protection, more defended separation between their false self-performance and their hidden core. But kissing, especially the way an empath kisses, with full presence and open energy, creates a kind of contact that's too intimate for the defended system to tolerate. It's not that the narcissist doesn't want connection. It's that the kind of energetic penetration that comes with genuine kissing threatens the very defenses that keep them psychologically intact. So they pull away, they avoid, they keep kissing brief, superficial, performative, because sustained, authentic kissing with an empath who brings their full energetic presence isn't just intimate, it's invasive to a system that survives through separation, that depends on barriers, remaining impermeable, that cannot afford to be touched in the places that empath's open presence naturally reaches toward when someone's energy naturally penetrates, where your survival depends on remaining impenetrable. Distance isn't rejection, it's self-preservation against a contact that threatens to reveal what must remain hidden. But let's talk about something even more fundamental, that the narcissist avoidance of kissing reveals, something that strikes at the heart of what's actually absent in these relationships. Because when you peel back all the layers we've discussed, you arrive at a stark reality. The narcissist avoidance of genuine kissing exposes the absence of genuine desire. Now, I need to be very precise about what I am. And by desire here, because the narcissist certainly appears to desire, they pursue, they seduce, they engage physically. But there's a crucial distinction between the performance of desire and the authentic experience of it, between wanting someone for what they can provide versus wanting them for who they actually are. Genuine desire, the kind that emerges from authentic connection to another human being, is fundamentally relational. It's desire for that specific person, arising from genuine attraction to their particular qualities, their essence, who they are as an individual. This kind of desire has a quality of genuine hunger for connection with this person, not just any person. It carries an emotional and psychological investment that goes beyond the physical. But the narcissist's relationship to desire is fundamentally different. What they experience isn't desire for a person. It's desire for what that person represents, what they can provide, how they serve the narcissist's needs, what they can provide, how they serve the narcissist's needs. The attraction isn't to the individual, but to their function, validation, supply, ego reinforcement, validation, supply, ego reinforcement, the meeting of specific psychological needs, and kissing, sustained, passionate, authentic kissing, tends to reveal this distinction in ways that other physical acts don't. Because kissing, when it's genuine, emerges from and expresses real desire for connection with this specific person. There's a emotional quality to authentic kissing, a wanting of the other person that goes beyond mechanical physical attraction. Think about what happens when you genuinely desire someone. When you're authentically attracted to who they are, kissing them feels natural, compelling, something you want to do, not because it serves a goal, but because the desire itself pulls you toward that connection. There's a hunger for that particular contact, for the taste of that specific person, for the intimacy that kissing creates with them, but the narcissist doesn't experience this. But the narcissist doesn't experience this. They can't, because they're not actually relating to the empath as a full person. They're relating to the empath as a particularly high quality source of supply, as someone who serves crucial psychological functions as a means to various ends. And you don't genuinely desire a means. You use it. So when it comes to kissing, which is hard to perform convincingly without some authentic desire fueling it, the narcissist's fundamental lack becomes visible. They can go through the physical motions, but the quality is different. There's a mechanical aspect, a going through the motions feeling, an absence of the genuine hunger that animates authentic kissing, and the empath can feel this difference, even if they can't always articulate it. There's something missing in the narcissist's kiss, some quality of genuine wanting, of real hunger for connection, of authentic desire for you specifically rather than for what you provide. The kiss feels empty, performative, like they're playing a role rather than expressing genuine feeling. The narcissist becomes aware at some level that sustained kissing reveals this absence. Brief kisses can be performed adequately. A quick peck doesn't require authentic desire to execute convincingly, but prolonged, passionate kissing. That demands a quality of genuine wanting that the narcissist simply doesn't have access to. Because here's the thing, you can perform a lot of things in a relationship. You can perform interest, perform affection, perform attraction. The narcissist becomes quite skilled at these performances. But sustained, passionate kissing is one of the hardest things to perform convincingly without the underlying authentic desire, because the absence shows up in countless subtle ways, in the quality of attention, in the presence or lack of genuine hunger, in whether the kiss feels like connection or just mechanics. And the empath, with their heightened sensitivity and capacity for reading emotional truth, is particularly likely to detect this absence. They might not consciously think, this person doesn't genuinely desire me, but they sense something's off. The kiss doesn't feel the way kissing someone who genuinely wants you feels. There's a hollow quality, an emotional vacancy underneath the physical contact. So the narcissist avoids the situation that might expose this absence. They avoid sustained kissing because it creates too many opportunities for the empath to notice that something essential is missing. They keep physical contact focused on acts that can remain more transactional, more mechanical, more clearly serving a purpose. Because purpose they understand, function they can work with, but kissing for the sake of kissing. Kissing as an expression of genuine desire to connect with this specific person. Kissing that emerges from authentic hunger rather than strategic goal. This doesn't fit into their framework. It doesn't serve a clear purpose in their transactional model of relationship. It's just connection, and connection without function, intimacy without goal, desire for a person rather than for what they provide. These are experiences the narcissist doesn't have access to. This is perhaps the saddest aspect of the narcissist's avoidance of kissing, because what it reveals is how profoundly alone they are even in the midst of what appears to be intimate relationship. They're physically close to another person, but fundamentally disconnected from genuine desire for that person. They're going through the motions of intimacy while unable to access the authentic wanting that makes intimacy meaningful. The empath experiences this avoidance as personal rejection. They don't want to kiss me, therefore I'm not desirable. But the truth is more tragic than that. The narcissist doesn't genuinely want to kiss anyone in the way that genuine desire drives kissing. It's not about the empath's desirability. It's about the narcissist's incapacity for the kind of authentic desire that sustained, passionate kissing both requires and reveals. So they avoid it. They keep kisses brief and infrequent. They deflect when the empath seeks that kind of intimate contact. Not because they're rejecting the empath specifically, but because extended kissing would expose what must remain hidden. That beneath all the performance of desire is a profound absence of the genuine article. When your relationship to others is fundamentally transactional, kissing becomes pointless. because you can't hunger for what you only use, can't desire what you've reduced to function. Now, building on this understanding of the narcissist's absence of genuine desire, there's another crucial element to their avoidance of kissing that reveals something about the strategic, calculated nature of how they operate in relationships. Because the narcissist is highly selective about when and how they engage in intimate acts, and that selectivity is based entirely on whether the act serves their control agenda. Let me explain what I mean by this. The narcissist doesn't approach physical intimacy the way someone in a healthy relationship does, as an expression of connection, as mutual pleasure, as something that emerges organically from genuine desire and affection. For the narcissist, every intimate act is strategic. Every physical contact serves a purpose within their larger system of control and manipulation. Think about the forms of physical intimacy the narcissist does engage in, and notice what they accomplish. They serve specific functions: demonstrating conquest, proving their desirability, securing your attachment, create an obligation, maintaining access, asserting dominance. Each intimate act fits into a transactional framework where the narcissist is getting something: validation, supply, control, proof of their power. But kissing, genuine, sustained, passionate kissing, doesn't fit neatly into this framework. What does kissing accomplish for the narcissist's agenda? It doesn't prove conquest the way other physical acts might. It doesn't provide the same kind of ego validation. It doesn't create the same type of obligation or debt. It's not a goal-oriented act with a clear outcome that serves their needs. Kissing, in its truest form, is about connection rather than conquest. It's an end in itself rather than a means to an end. In the next minute, you kiss someone because you want that specific moment of intimacy with them, not because it gets you something else. And this is precisely why it holds no interest for the narcissist. The narcissist reserves their energy and engagement for acts that serve clear purposes in their control system. They're calculating, whether consciously or unconsciously, about what they give and to whom and when. And if an act doesn't advance their agenda, doesn't secure supply, doesn't prove their superiority, doesn't maintain control, it gets deprioritized or avoided entirely. From this perspective, kissing isn't just pointless to the narcissist. It's actually a poor use of resources. It requires them to be present, to be vulnerable, to engage authentically, but it doesn't deliver the payoff that makes that investment worthwhile within their transactional worldview. Why expend energy? Why expend energy on something that's just about connection when you could engage in acts that actually accomplish your objectives? This is particularly stark with empaths, because the empath experiences kissing as connection. They value it precisely because it's intimate, because it creates emotional closeness. Because it's an expression of affection and desire. For the empath, kissing is meaningful in itself. It doesn't need to accomplish anything beyond the connection it creates. But the narcissist looks at the empath's desire for kissing and calculates, what do I gain from this? And the answer is, not much that I can't get more efficiently elsewhere. The empath's attachment can be secured through other means. Their emotional investment can be maintained through intermittent reinforcement. Their supply can be extracted through other forms of engagement. So the narcissist withholds kissing or makes it brief and infrequent because it simply doesn't serve their purposes efficiently enough to warrant the investment. They're not going to expend emotional energy, however limited their capacity for it, on an act that's fundamentally about connection, when connection isn't their goal. Control is the goal. Supply is the goal. Kissing doesn't advance these goals in ways that justify its costs. And here's where this becomes particularly cruel. The empath experiences the withholding of kissing as rejection, as evidence they're not desirable enough, not attractive enough, not worthy of that form of intimate attention. They might try harder, might work to become more desirable, might contort themselves to earn the kissing and affection they're craving. But the withholding has nothing to do with the empath's desirability. It's a calculated decision based on the narcissist's internal cost-benefit analysis. Kissing costs vulnerability and presence, but doesn't deliver sufficient control or supply to justify those costs. So it gets withheld not as punishment for the empath's inadequacy, but as a strategic allocation of the narcissist's limited capacity for intimate engagement. This also explains why the narcissist's limited capacity for intimate engagement. This also explains why the narcissist might kiss readily. Kissing, performative displays of affection, these serve purposes. They demonstrate to others that the narcissist can attract and maintain a desirable partner. They create an image of a loving relationship that benefits the narcissist's reputation. They might make the empath feel temporarily valued, which prevents them from leaving. But private, sustained, genuine kissing that serves no purpose beyond connection itself, that gets avoided because it doesn't fit the framework. It's intimacy. It's intimacy for intimacy's sake, and the narcissist simply doesn't operate from that paradigm. The empath often doesn't realize this because they're approaching the relationship from a completely different framework. For the empath, acts of intimacy are valuable because of the connection they create, the love they express, the emotional closeness they foster. The empath can't imagine that someone would calculate whether kissing serves a strategic purpose before deciding whether to engage in it. But that's exactly what the narcissist does, not necessarily through conscious deliberation, though sometimes it is conscious, but through the automatic filtering system their pathology has created. Does this serve my needs? Does this advance my agenda? Does this advance my agenda? Does this give me what I'm trying to extract from this relationship? If the answer is no, or if the answer is no, if the answer is not efficiently enough, the behavior gets deprioritized. And kissing, with its demands for presence and vulnerability, and its lack of clear transactional benefit, consistently fails the narcissist's internal cost-benefit analysis. This is why explaining to the narcissist how much kissing means to you, how much you need that form of intimacy, doesn't change their behavior. You're appealing to connection as a value, but connection isn't their value. You're asking them to engage in an act for its own sake, but they don't operate from a paradigm where anything is valuable for its own sake, rather than for what it provides them. So the avoidance continues. Not because you've failed to communicate clearly enough, not because you're not desirable enough, but because you're not desirable enough, but because the narcissist has unconsciously assessed that kissing doesn't serve their control agenda sufficiently to warrant the investment. They're saving their capacity for intimate engagement for acts that deliver clearer returns on investment within their transactional framework. When intimacy becomes a calculated investment rather than an expression of genuine connection, you'll only receive what serves their agenda, and connection, for its own sake, will always be withheld.